So thank you for joining Career Stories Live in person and online. I'm Claudia, and I'll be facilitating today's event. So 3 sessions have already been held in India and the UK, and if you haven't had the chance to watch them yet, you can watch them again on Oxford Share. So the reason why we are holding this series of Career Stories Live is because the recent employee survey told us that a lot of you said that you are proud of working for OUP, but not as many of you know how to develop a career here. So in response to that, we hope that through listening to stories from our directors and executives, you'll be able to identify any opportunities that you currently have, rediscover your passion, and learn how you can grow your career here. The session will be divided into 3 parts, the interview, Q&A, and a short discussion activity at the end for the participants in this room. So if you have any questions, please save them after the interview. And if you have any questions online, you can send them to Priscilla at priscilla.tang@oup.com. So please give a warm welcome to Mei, our Managing Director, and Frankie, our Assistant Editorial Director from the Dictionary Publishing Unit. So I'm sure everybody in this room knows who you are, but can you give us a brief introduction about yourselves and maybe a quick summary of what your role involves?
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity today, especially those of you tuning in online and those of you who made it to the room today. My name is Mei. I am the Managing Director for Oxford University Press China in Hong Kong's office. I have been here for slightly over 3 years now. In terms of my career path, I have a little slide for you. Okay, so this is just a quick summary going backwards about my career path. So I sort of made a summary of the 3 stages of my career into the first stage in terms of being an explorer. So at that time, I was taking on different jobs at Microsoft at that time. It was pretty much saying yes to any opportunities along my path. Very often you will see those jobs overlapping, so that's a typical beginning or start of anybody's career, I assume. And then later on, I move into a more specialized role. So I stay into one role for more than a few years and try to build my expertise in that particular area. And then later on, move into a generalist role, which is managing an operation, including a semi-government organization called Hong Kong Education City, and as well as my current role, managing OUP in Hong Kong. So that's just a quick summary. Thank you.
Okay, my turn. So I'm Frankie. Now I work under AEHO, but I'm also the head of Dictionary Publishing Unit of OUP China. I'm responsible for OUP's lexical publishing program in the Greater China region. I'm also a representative of AE in the Group Dictionary Committee, and we also set up a new cross-branch team called AE Lexical Exec Team, so I'm the coordinator of the team. I joined the press pretty long ago as an assistant editor back in 2001, so you can do the math.
Okay, so let's go back to earlier in your career when you just started working. Can you tell us about the experiences that you had that have impacted your career in the long term?
I think when I first started working in the technology firms with new technology pushing out once every 12 months to 18 months, that sort of pushed you to learn new things constantly. So if you go back to the time when I first started working, that was the WordPerfect or Lotus 123 time. Probably not many of you still remember those days. You do. So at that time, it was about fighting for new market shares. So we had to learn new products constantly. There was different gadgets that's being pushed out. We have a process in the company that's called dog food. So whenever there's a new product out, a new version out, we had to be the first group to use it in our office, which is challenging because that crushes your server or your laptop constantly. But from that painful process, in a way, it pushes you to find a solution. Very often help is not GTSD, like a phone call away. So it was constantly learning, self-learning. I think that in a way has helped me to adjust to different challenges, whether it's technology-wise or learning a new industry or learning a new partner or building a new program in a way. I would say I started in a very timid role meaning I didn't really know what to do. But because of that environment, it sort of forced me to learn and get used to dealing with ambiguity. Knowing that the things are not being formed, knowing that I have to put in additional work to form something, to make something out of nothing. I think that in a way has shaped me into the business development person I am today.
Well, for me, I think it's a bit different. I studied translation and interpretation in university, so I thought my career must be related to that. So actually, my previous job, or maybe my first job, was a subtitle translator in a domestic English TV channel. So somehow, maybe you can read my name on the TV screen, but I'm not working freelance now. It was, just long time ago. So I was with the TV station for about 4 years, but very soon I found actually we did not have plenty of career development opportunities. It's just because the workflow or maybe the people structure are really standardized, strict. So you don't have much room to develop your career. And then we also had really hectic schedule. So on the contract, it was said we work on irregular hours. So it sounds pretty good. You do not need to get back to the office every day, but actually you have to work at least 15 or 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you just don't know what else can you do except for, translation. And also I had a really controlling manager. And for me, actually, I think, some freedom at work is very important. So I think about the same time, actually, the dictionaries team here in OUP China recruit assistant editor. And I had worked as a freelance proofreader for the team when I was in university. So I decided to give it a shot, and that's why I'm here.
Okay, so speaking of career development, how did you identify your areas of development, and how did you develop the necessary skills to help you move forward in your career?
Want to start?
Well, I guess for me, the most important thing is you need to identify the gaps, and then also try to find a way to bridge the gap. That's very important. So, for example, when I start my work here in OUP China, okay, it's completely different from what I did for the TV station. It's about project planning, it's also about project management, and you need to liaise with different parties, so everything is new. But also in the group meetings, you speak, you tell your stories or maybe your challenge to your group members, and then they will try to give you feedback. So it's something, really interactive, and which I didn't experience in the TV station. So I think it was a really important stage for me to try to develop my career, or maybe how to set some directions for my career.
Reflecting back about how I've developed or identified my areas of development, most of it, I would say, it's probably coming from the people around me more than the formal processes. In the past, I've done various 360 degrees evaluation for my manager, my peers, as well as my team. I've also done various Strength Finder. If you have read that book, there's some online questionnaires you fill out. I've also done my EMBA studies, where they will ask your classmates to evaluate you, and they will give you a sticker about who they think you are, your characters. I think all those sort of was fun to do, but very often it sort of remain at that stage. It's fun and you get to know it, but it doesn't really change any behavior. So one thing I realized that I lean on quite often, it's around the people around me. So ever since I was young, I actually asked my dad that question when I was in my teens. I said, Dad, if one day, I grow up and become very successful, what do you think will be that blocker in my life? So you guessed what he said. He said, your 3 minutes passion for something. He see me as someone who's passionate about something for a very short period of time and then move on right away. So that's why I intentionally decided to stay in Microsoft for 12 years, just to prove him wrong. So that's one area. The other part, I realized that in my early career, I made some really good friends. There was 5 girlfriends of mine I get to know in my very first job. We travel together very often. We share our career stories. Right now, we're in different industries. But very often, once in a while, we'll ask each other, bounce off ideas about what are the things you would like me to change. You know, what do you see that I should really improve on or focus on? So that will be another reflection. People don't really see me at work, but they see me as a friend. They know my strength and they know my weakness. And very often, their advice, it's much more close to heart and more closer to reality than how I would like to, how I can see for myself in a way. So that's the second part of it. The third part of development are from my colleagues. Most of you know I've worked for Microsoft for 12 years, but I don't have a technical background. So at that time, I had a group of friends who were engineers. So a few of us from marketing, a few of us from the engineering department will go out for drinks. And then those few engineers, they would explain to me some of the technical terms like SNA server. How does that work with a mainframe? They would talk to me in a layman term and try to help us to understand. I think for them, they sort of seeing themselves pitching to a layman about technology, which is what they are passionate about. But for us, it was more like learning about the other side of the business as well. So that in a way helped me quite a bit to learn and to develop. So I would say build yourself around people who sees more potential in you than who you believe you are. And then once in a while, have that conversation. I think Frankie or probably some of my managers will know, once in a while I ask them, what are the few things you would like me to start doing, stop doing, and continue doing? So those are the three very good questions that can generate some action-oriented advices from people who know you.
Okay, so my next question is actually about technology. So how has technology impacted your career in any way? And as more jobs are replaced by robots, how do you think we can use technology to our advantage instead of seeing it as a threat?
Well, yes, it did bring a really big impact on me. So I only got a one-day break between my previous job and OUP. And so I spent that day to open my first personal email. I didn't know anything about technology. But soon I joined OUP. One of the first assignments I got was to handle the HTML format data. So it sounds like, you know, rocket science to me. But you see, it's part of your job, and so you have to learn what kind of data it is, or maybe what we expect to do with the data. So that was a really interesting episode for me. And also, for my colleagues at that time, I think most of them were really experienced editors. But we were in a major transition period because we decided to use software or maybe computer program to do dictionary publishing. I think it was about the early millennium, year 2000 or something. So actually they were quite reluctant for the change of workflow because you really need to learn a lot about that. So besides handle those HTML format data, I also need to perform the UAT of our tailor-made dictionary editing software. So you need to use the software to do your work, but at the same time, you also need to perform the UAT and talk to the programmer what kind of problems you are experiencing when you use it. So I think, you know, it's just really stressful at the time. But I mean, later on, when you pass that stage, you will find that, so you find it stressful is just because of uncertainties. And you have uncertainties, so you find it challenging. But you don't need to deal with all your challenge at the same time. You can deal with them one by one. So my tactics was, as just may propose, well, you might be able to find someone near you who knows a bit better than you in that subject matter. So just go to talk to him and her. And then you need to digest your conversation and try to find your own way to get yourself understand what's going on. I think that operation thing you go here would be really the key for you to sorting out all those problems. And then the second part of your question about whether we see technologies as a threat to our work or maybe to our living. I would say, well, from editor's point of view, automation really enhances efficiency. So I would say I'm really open to technology. And also because I work for content. Content still requires staff and subject expertise. So we should be open to this and try to find a way how you can cope with the technologies better.
I agree. I think ultimately it's the benefit of what technology could generate for you or for your job or for your customers. That's what matters. I've always been a technology junkie, so whenever there's something new, I have a tendency or being drawn to those gadgets. And even with the apps nowadays on the phone, I always ask my friends, what's the latest, most interesting ones that you have seen? You know, show me. You know, I just want to have a taste of it, and then I probably would delete it a day or two. But having a flavor of it, knowing where it's heading, it's quite exciting in a way. So I would say, you know, given all the changes happening in OUP, I would say it is challenging, honestly speaking. Whenever there's a new technology, new way of working, it's going to change how you've always used to work in the office or your processes. It will take some time and some adjustment. I guess the ultimate point we're trying to drive through the new technology is to be more efficient further down the road. So while you're having your eyes set at the long-term goal, look at the bite-sized solvable problems or solvable learning points you can tackle. Just do one at a time. Otherwise, it's going to be crushing down quite heavily. So I would say take it slowly, do it when you need it.
My next question is, what has been the biggest challenge so far, and how has this impacted you and your career?
Okay, if I can go back to my slide, throughout those time that I've worked, there are a few different decision points I had to make in my career. So when I thought about sharing that, I think I should be really honest with you about what are those challenges and how I've made those decisions. The first part, so that was after working for 3 years in Microsoft doing regional business development. Microsoft's regional office was being relocated from Hong Kong to Singapore. So at that time, I was asked to see, you know, whether I want to relocate to Singapore or not. So it was quite a big decision point. So at that point, the challenge was, do I want to continue on with my career development, which is look after 13 countries. So it was quite a fun job, heavy, very heavy, highly pressured role, but it's also satisfying as well. So to move or not to move, that was one of the major challenge. Personally, at that time, I had been dating my boyfriend at that time for 12 years, a long time, much longer than my career at that time. So it was at a point of whether to get married or just move on. So in the end, I decided to stay. I decided to move back to our Microsoft Hong Kong office to take up a regional, a Hong Kong education business development role. So comparing to previously my regional role, carrying 13 countries, managing people in 13 countries, you know, it's quite a different path, I would say. But to me, I realized, you know, you can't have it all at the same time. There's a certain point in time, you just have to do the right thing. So that's why I made the most out of those 4 years. I got married, I had 2 kids. So very result-oriented, I would say. So that's one key point of challenge. The second part probably come here. So that was at the 12 years mark of Microsoft. So I was at a point thinking, should I just continue on forever with Microsoft, or is it about time to move on to something else? I was also sort of in a midlife crisis thinking, you know, everything that I know is something how Microsoft does things. What if that skill set is not applicable anymore? What if Microsoft doesn't want me anymore? So it was quite challenging and thinking, would I be able to survive? So that the challenge is more from being sort of a little bit of self-doubt and thinking about whether I can survive and continue on and build a career. So I made a really bold decision saying, hey, what the heck, you know, just go out and try it out. So I left Microsoft at that time. It wasn't that challenging because I was moving, instead of looking at it from Microsoft to outside of Microsoft, it's more around the role. So coming from a specialist role, going into a generalist role, managing entire operation, that was a huge challenge after making that decision. So the natural thing I decided to do was to do a part-time study. So being a specialist, I didn't really know about organization structure. I didn't really know about financial management, for example. So I decided to do a formal study. I used those 4 years at do a part-time study to build up my confidence and a little bit of knowledge in the other areas that I never had a chance to touch with. And then the third challenging point is here. I don't know whether you'll be facing something as well. It's a career break. So all this time, I've continued on my job. So it was jobs on top of the other jobs or continue on. I've never made any breaks. So at that point, my dad had some health problem. So I decided maybe that's time for me to accompany him to go through his therapy. It was really challenging because having sort of a colorful career for that many years, it's hard to imagine yourself not having a job during daytime. So it was quite a challenging point. But then, when you wait between family and career and how much you can afford it, it was quite a natural decision. So I decided to break that career. I took a year off to go through treatment with my dad and then rejoin workforce. I would say that 1 year is not as relaxing as you would imagine. The first part is about the treatment, going through the different treatments with my dad. The other part is about not knowing whether you'll be able to rejoin the workforce, where you will land yourself. That insecurity sort of push you on the edge. With the hindsight, I would say actually it's not that challenging. Hong Kong's employment rate has always been very low. So it's a matter of where you want to land, right? So that's the other challenge. So I would say these are the 3 challenging points and how I've made that decision. I hope it's useful sharing.
Well, for my case, I think it was just a little chapter or episode for my career here in OUP China. I think back in about 2009, there's something happened within our division. So I was asked to take over the development or the business development for the whole dictionary team. But everything was, in an unofficial way. So it's not easy to start the work because you don't know whether you are capable enough to do it. And actually, frankly speaking, I wasn't well equipped enough because you don't know how to negotiate with both internal stakeholders or maybe external business partners, or maybe if you really want to draft an agreement, what are the key terms, or maybe what would be the major parameters or criteria you need to take into account when you try to form a business model. So it was really difficult. And as I mentioned before, once you're able to identify your knowledge gaps, try to find a way to bridge them one by one. So I actually tried to spend a lot of extra time to study the contracts. So I think actually what I did was really legal. We had some contract file. So I think, for some staff members, you have access to those contract files. So I would, randomly pick some contracts, and then I'll read through the contracts, and then I'll try to make footnotes about, the clauses that I don't understand, and then I will talk to the colleagues in finance department, or maybe some colleagues who are performing the rights and licensing business, so they would be able to tell me more stories about how they conclude to write those clauses, or maybe what are the underlying reasoning for those operations. So you really need some cases for you to build up your experience or confidence. And I guess I really, that maybe 3 or 4 years was really, really memorable. And that would be, one of the episodes I really want to share here.
That's very interesting because one thing I realized is that it's at a challenging time when you learn the most about yourself and you pick up the new skill sets, isn't it?
Right, and because I said, as I said at the very beginning, actually everything was quite unofficial. So honestly, there wasn't much support or training at the time. But if you do have passion, or maybe you find it, you are responsible for those work, and then you'll try to find a way to do it well.
So taking up new challenges. How do you maintain your career direction? And do you set up any aspirational goals? And if so, how do you manage to keep working towards them?
I don't really have a career goal. I actually shared that in another session with some of the colleagues. When I first started working, I tried to identify 3 different areas. Basically, the first part is it has to be something that I believe in. So in the very beginning, I believe in the power of technology, whether it's applied in education or in the NGO community sector, or whether it's in the enterprise. So that's something that I'm passionate about. The second part is the job that I feel like it can utilize my strength. So some of the things, like from the beginning, I had my first degree in marketing, so that's why I started exploring with various marketing jobs, utilizing my strength and identify what I wanted to do. And the third part, of course, is the job can pay me and sustain me in my position, support my family as well. So if you have those things in place, then in a way it sort of evolves, and then the opportunities build on each other. So reflecting back on my career path, I didn't really plan it to go this way. It was from my very first job within Microsoft that my manager was managing a much bigger business, so she sees that maybe I can take on a bit more. So there was no adjustment of my title, there was no pay raise, it was just, can you do this? And I said, yeah, why not? And then later on there was another team doing enterprise marketing. They said, Mei, can you help us do that? I said, yeah, I can try. And then even later on, I was asked to do licensing marketing, which is around anti-piracy, because software piracy at the time was around, I think, 36% or so in Hong Kong. Those are revenue the software companies see as loss to the pirates, so trying to recover those revenue. I said, I knew nothing about legal, but if you think I can do it, why not, you know? So it was just one lending to the other. And then the regional business development role was a natural sort of evolvement from my local experience, and then later on, one after the other. So I would say if it is something that you feel passionate about, you will find a solution. You will find a way to drive something. You will find a way to identify the impact you have made for the business, and along that path, you will pick up new skill sets as well. So that's the other reason why I did not put down any job titles on my career path, because it is not a title that defines you. It is about that experience and how you have contributed through your job that matters.
Yes, passion, yeah. Though I don't look like a very passionate person. and somehow, I mean, passion is a very big word, or maybe it sounds a bit dramatic, but I'll try to paraphrase it. I would say whether you love what you're doing, or whether you think you're good at what you're doing. So if you got positive answers to both, I think you have passion about what you're doing. So, I mean, back to your question about, second part about aspirational goals, sort of. Well, I mean, because I like what I'm doing. So, I mean, somehow I will pay more attention about, the industry, the market. But once you find some new directions that you really want to pursue, I think the next thing I would like to do is I try to materialize it. Or maybe I try to, visualize it in a more solid way, because it's just not about me. Here in the company, or maybe in an organization, I think it's more about a team. So you got some idea, you got some concept, you got some direction, but it's not just you to make it happen. So you need to let your teammates, they also understand what you want to do, or maybe you also need to listen to them, because you can't know everything. So for example, like technologies, I would say I didn't know very much about technology, but I think if I need to do some projects for digital platform, well, I must acquire some basic skills, because when I negotiate with partners, or maybe when I liaise with other potential partners, well, at least I would understand all those major jargons, or maybe I know who's who. So I think that's something really crucial, well, in my cases.
Okay, so if you're taking on new tasks, and if you want to set a goal for that task, what's your number one tip for keeping to your goals and working towards your goals?
One story I like to very often share in the orientation session in OUPC. A lot of you have been here a long time. I probably haven't told you that story, but the newcomers you probably heard. It's always about identifying the top goal of that company you're joining, and then identifying the link between your contribution with what that company is trying to drive in the community and how it does things. If you can find that link, then that is the career path you want to build towards, because ultimately it is about creating that win-win situation for the business towards the mission through your work. That's going to lead you to somewhere, whether it's up the career ladder or is it somewhere else, I don't know.
Well, for me, again, passion. Mm-hmm. Is the major drive for everything. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my next question is, what's been the boldest decision you've made, and how did you reach that decision?
Boldest for me is definitely to leave Microsoft. There are very times my friends will ask me, did I regret that decision? Because I still have a lot of friends at Microsoft who has been there ever since day one I was there. So right now, I guess they are multi-millionaires now because of the stock options. So if I look at the stock price of Microsoft, yeah, sort of probably not the best decision if financial is the only goal of my career. But since it isn't, it is about learning. It is about testing out and realize what other potentials or what other skill sets I have. Then, thinking about that one, I would say probably that would be a good decision with the hindsight. Yeah.
Well, for me, it would be when we decided to do our first dictionary app back in 2010, and the product was launched in 2012. So that was a 2-year gap, and I think not just me, but my whole team actually spent those 1.5 or almost 2 years to do a lot of preparation. So for example, okay, what kind of contract template we need to use? Or maybe what are the key terms for us to set up all those technology agreement, and then what would be the possible or maybe appropriate business models to do, and also about tender. You need to find some potential candidates to submit proposals so that you can find the best developers. So I think it was really new idea back in 2010 or something in OUP China here, and I would say it was a little experiment conducted in the dark. Not much people care about that, and then we try to make something happen. And of course, I mean, the most scary part would be how to convince the boss to get you the money to do it. So I remember at that very moment I was asked 2 questions at the very end. So the first question is, my boss asked me, my manager asked me, so Frankie, tell me, how much money are we going to earn from this project? And then the second question is, so we have a pretty healthy income from the print dictionary. Are we going to jeopardize our print revenue because you are now producing a digital version? Well, perhaps we had spent about, a year or so to, do all those preparation. So I sort of, just like reflection. So the answer is, I couldn't tell you how much money we're going to make, but I can tell you how much money we're going to lose. So we are sitting here, keep debating about the business case of an app, but no one can really prepare a very good sales forecast about digital products. But if we see it's a really important business decision to make, or maybe a direction that we need to try, then why don't we do a very serious piloting in the area? And so we have the list of investment about this and that. And so if you find everything is sensible, then maybe we need to make the final decision whether we do this experiment or not. And secondly, if every time when we try to do something new, and one of the major questions in your mind would be, are we going to jeopardize or cannibalize our current business model? Well, I don't think it's really positive. I would say some people actually, they don't use print dictionary now, but they might want their mobile phone or tablet PC have some dictionary. Actually, I'm creating new demand. So if we're doing something for new demand, it would be more positive. And I guess it was a really good lesson to me, or maybe I try to talk to my team too, which is maybe at the very beginning you find something is less probable, less possible, but perhaps try to look at it in a positive way and try to find out more possibility. I think it's not just about making a new product, but also about how you face your challenge at work.
So I think we all experience some stress from work in one way or another. So how do you deal with stress, and what is your advice when it comes to balancing life and work?
So I hope what I'm going to say sounds political correctly as Mei sits beside me. Well, I think work is just part of our lives, not your whole lives. So sufficient rest and just try to make yourself available to do what you enjoy to do at least once in a while is very, very important. So if you like to go movies, well, try to go movie. Well, if you can't do it every week, well, what about once a month? So at least you got something to, you know, hold on there, right? And yes, try to identify something you enjoy. So for me, well, I like music, I like movie, I like books, and of course I like food, as you can tell, literally.
Just building on what Frankie has shared, I think finding something you enjoy doing is actually quite important. Sometimes it's about your body, so building that resilience. So in my case, it's about running. I enjoy running, which keeps me going, gives me more energy and help me think through some of the problems at work or in general, life in general. So that will be one ritual you can build for yourself, whether it's running or swimming or something else, something that can take your mind off it. The other part, probably in Asia scenario, you know, being a wife, a mother, a daughter, people do expect a lot from you as well, being the caretaker in the family. So that is the area where I feel sometimes it's quite pressured. But what I've come to the conclusion is that you can't have it all at the same time, but you can space it out. There are certain times when your family needs you more, you just have to set aside time for them. And there are other times where you just need to set aside time for yourself. In my case, I just need to be away from my kids. Yeah, they can be quite handful, especially when they're in the teenage years. So it's about that private time for yourself as well, so to find that balance. Sometimes it's about career. So when I travel, I tend to work much longer hours compared to when I'm in Hong Kong. So it's about finding that balance that you feel most comfortable with. After all, I think, you know, stress comes from probably, you know, a gigantic block of tasks you need to deliver, a huge, you know, high-stake projects, for example. One advice I can share with you is how I usually do is that while setting my eyes on the big, gigantic goal or seemingly impossible goal to achieve, I try to stay away from that, to look at the bite-sized tasks that I can do on that particular day. I keep my daily diaries. There are certain things I need to do today. I write them there in the morning, and then I try to cross them out at the end of the day, and that makes me feel very happy. Even though it's still far away from the big, gigantic, impossible goal, it helps me, it sort of comforts me, letting me know that I am getting a little bit closer to that, we will reach there by taking a small step every day. So that's my other sort of way of managing, yeah.
Okay, so my last question. Who has been your biggest inspiration, and do you have someone that you look up to?
I don't really have one particular person that I feel are, you know, it's inspirational. I read quite a bit about different successful business people. I read those as sort of their career story, their life story, and how they have handled different things in different situations. I talk to friends. There's one particular CIO whom I met really early on in my career. She used to be a very successful CIO in Hong Kong Jockey Club. As you can imagine, she's, I think she's at least 20, 30 years older than me. So being a CIO at that time in a large organization is quite something. So she's someone I draw some inspiration from. From time to time, I'll go out to have lunch with her just to talk to her. She also has 2 daughters. She share about how to manage home and balancing with work. You know, sometimes it's just her talking, and I pick up bits and pieces. I'm not too sure she will consider herself being a mentor or coach of mine, but I definitely see that way. It's not a formal relationship, but it's someone that I, you know, once in a while I wanted to talk to. I think that in a way helps me, you know, to understand what might be coming my way. She's now retired. She has 2 girls working full-time. She seems to have more time on hand as well. So now I have more tendency to call her and go out to have lunch with her.
I would say all my business partners, both internal and external, good or bad, they inspire me in different ways. I do have a few colleagues, well, maybe former colleagues. well, as Mei said, I might not name them as my coach or mentor, but if I do have, some issues, or perhaps I just don't know how to figure out some operable solutions, so perhaps I may, just call them and talk to them, and I think it would be helpful.
The last bit, if I can add, in case you want to know my tips for everyone working here, I will probably refer to the last bit of my slide. I share this with some of my colleagues here in our Hong Kong office through email and various other occasions. I think it's actually quite important because if you want to build a career, if you want to be known, if you want to show others that you're open for opportunities, the first part is you have to be present. People have to know that you're interested in advancing or taking up more responsibilities. So being open and honest about what you wanted to do career-wise is very important. Having that presence when you join a meeting, in addition to listening in or to learn from the others, it's very important to also contribute in various meetings so that people will know your strength. They will see your passion, through those interactions as well. I think that will help you to establish sort of your brand internally to build a career. The second part I cover a little bit is to make your priorities known. One painful lesson I learned in my career, the last 4 years with Microsoft doing education business development, that time I was setting up a family, so I had 2 young kids. And then there was a few times where opportunities just flew past me without me knowing. So I was thinking, what happened? Because there are people around you, they constantly make assumptions about you as well. They see Mei having a new family, 2 kids, one is 3 years old, one is 1 year old. So they naturally assume I want to spend more time at home. So when there was an opportunity, they even asked me. It was well-intentioned assumption. They try to help me to balance work and life. But then I would really want to be consulted. I would want to be asked or invited. I may still say no, but still having that opportunity is quite important. So think back in that lesson that I've learned, I realized that I hadn't really made my priorities known to them. I hadn't said to them, after spending some time with regional, setting up a family, I'm really ready for the next bigger role, or I'm interested in this particular sector. I didn't really share that with anyone. So I would say, if you had the opportunity, do share your priorities, what you wanted to achieve. The last bit is about support group. You can't do this alone. Sometimes it's quite stressful. A lot of us will have this imposter syndrome. We just don't think we're good enough. Sometimes you do need someone around you, rally, to go with you, to tell you that you are good enough. You can try this other opportunities. You can try that, projects. Having that support group is very important to make you real as well as give you strength to continue on. So that's my 3 advice.
What about Frankie? Do you have any additional pointers or advice?
I think, the support group thing is quite good. But for me, I might be, I really enjoy to listen and learn from different people. But I do not want to, make it like a very big group thing. So I'll try to digest, the input from different parties. Because I think once you try to build up your professionalism in your work, probably you need more about multidimensional thinking or critical thinking. So you can't really sit here and think yourselves. You need to listen different people and give you different perspective, and then try to pick the pieces from different parties and then try to form a better solution for yourself. And so I think, some support group, whether you want to do it one-on-one or maybe, just, try to share your story and try to help each other, it's just up to you. But I guess this is a very important step for you because you can't fight alone.
Okay, so we can take questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions for Mei or Frankie?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for your inspiring sharing. And from your sharing, I could see that constantly learning plays a very important part in your career life. Could you give us some advice or tips on how we can develop this habit of constantly learning?
My experience, or maybe in my case, would be you keep observe the people or maybe what interested you. So if you're really interested in what you're doing, or maybe you find this is relevant to your work or maybe to your life, then you will just spend more time and energy to that. So I think that's very important. It's something from your heart. And then you also need to be more open-minded. Well, some people may think, okay, because I'm the manager, maybe I don't need to listen to my teammates. Perhaps they're less experienced than I am, but you don't know everything, and you have to be open-minded. And I think they can, bring you to some new perspective, or maybe actually they can give you more background information that you really need. And I think it's also a two-way thing. So once you become more open-minded and try to listen more, I think your teammates or maybe the people around you would find it, okay, it's easier to talk and work with you. So I think it would be, the vibe would be, become more positive.
One advice I would probably share is to make friends with people who are very different from you. Very often from those dialogue and conversation, you realize there's something really different, sometimes strange about them. You couldn't quite figure out why they're passionate about certain things. So that, in a way, makes you feel more curious, and you try to find out why. And through those conversations, it sort of make you learn something new as well. The second part is around passion. It's always about something you're passionate about. In my case, I like baking. I like making. I like making dresses for my kids, and I like baking cookies at home. So it's always about, how do I find the next nicer or better recipe? Can I try it out over there? Or can I tune the oven slightly differently? So it's always about constantly tweaking and trying to make something different. There's pros and cons with that, because for me, I can never stick to one recipe constantly. It's always adjusting for different people and different tastes, and my mom complains about it. Yeah.
So, any more questions from the audience?
I'd like to ask about leadership. Like, you two are leaders, and I would like to know, because you constantly talk about passion, and I would like to know what if your team, like half of your team members doesn't share the same passion with you. Like if they say, no, I'll just sit there, I'll do my work, I will go with the routine work, and I can't see your vision, it seems impossible. How would you convince them? How would you convince them to work with you, to do the same thing and share the same goal and work together towards that goal?
That's a very good question. Actually, being in the sort of driver's seat, that's what I've been asking myself constantly. If you can imagine, OUP is a car. Sort of we're being put into the driver's seat, and there are different people, mechanics, passengers, and then the ticketing staff on this bus. Everybody doing their part in order for this bus to move forward. If they're just doing their part of the job, it's okay, the bus will move. But if they're seeing a bigger role they can play to make that bus run smoother, then we'll be moving forward in a much better speed. So for us, it's quite challenging. It's always about asking people, can you be more honest about what you really want? Is it really getting boring, that particular project you're working on? Is it really getting that frustrating? Is that really answering your career development goals in the short term or medium term? Very often, I would say one thing I learned is that people at OUP are very nice people comparing to where I came from. Slightly differently, meaning people here are very polite. They will say yes to everything that you pass on to them. They will do their job to the utmost highest professional standards. But whereas coming from the IT industry, people often say no, and they ask you why, and people sometimes say yes, sometimes say no, but they ask a lot of why questions. So that's one thing I'm trying to instill through my role, is to get people to ask that question, why? Why are we doing it this way? Is it just because the processes were set up 10 years ago? Is it still relevant? Is it because maybe you want to see it, but did you ask her, she really want to sign that piece of paper? Is it absolutely, from compliance perspective, that's what we need to do? Or is it something that we have set up for ourselves? ages ago because it was necessary at that time. Sometimes it is that complexity that drives people down, that make them feel frustrated. It's not whether they're passionate about their job. I think people are still passionate about our mission and contributing to that mission in OUP. I think that still drives people forward. So my role right now is trying to clear those roadblocks, trying to help people to be more upfront and open about what is really stopping them, and ask people to play a challenger's role. Challenge the norm, challenge how we do things, and challenge whether we can do things better. If you ask me if everybody can ask a challenging question about some of the processes or the things that we do, then we will be able to untie ourselves a bit so that we can build capacity and do something else and drive the business forward. I hope that answers your question.
Well, for me, I think it will be observation, communication. So through observation, well, maybe through the weekly meeting or maybe some short project meetings, you should be able to observe something wrong. So maybe some colleagues, they would be really comfortable with what they are doing, or maybe they don't want to challenge themselves, or perhaps they are just, feel fine to do what they are asked to do. So if you see actually that colleague, actually he or she is, have much more potential to be developed. I think the second thing is maybe we need to find some time to communicate with each other to see if there is anything wrong, or perhaps do we have any, mismatch in terms of, perhaps project assignment, or perhaps maybe, some kind of resources assignment thing. Well, need to be frank. And so, I mean, through the communication, perhaps you need to, do some storytelling thing. Well, actually, I have been there. Well, you are not the only one to suffer, or maybe, in such, well, difficult time. But, in my case, or maybe in your case, what would be a possible way to do it? So I think the last step is try to find out some possibilities, because it's not, well, a dead end. There must be some solution. There must be some alternative. Whether you like your alternative or solution is another question. But in fact, it's not a dead end. So I think, well, for the communication thing, I would be really much emphasis at that such point. Well, to try to, well, make people feel less stressful, and then, well, let's see if we can find another solution. So in that case, maybe you can try to, restart the motor.
Any more questions from the audience here? No, so maybe we can go to the questions online. So the first one is, Mei and Frankie have both progressed well in their careers. Have they ever felt feelings of imposter syndrome, where an individual doubts their accomplishments and has a, you actually talked about that just now, and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as not really being able to do this? And if so, how did they deal with this?
For my case, is stepping out of Microsoft to where a general manager's role at Hong Kong S-City at that time, managing 60 people, P&L, dealing with the government. I definitely give the government some credit for hiring someone like me who never managed in P&L at that time. So I definitely feeling in being an imposter in that position. So there are a few things I did. The first part, of course, is to take an MBA to make sure that I know some of the detailed operations side of running a business. The other part is about talking to people. So whenever I join a new company, I try to talk to not just the management team or my direct report, always other talents in that organization as well, to understand what is causing them pain and what they're seeing in me that I can help them make a difference. By focusing on the things that people expect me to do, being in that leadership position, helps me to focus and spend my time wisely so that I am really making a difference. If I can see the difference I am making, that makes me feel good. One other thing I share with some of my friends I also do is that I have this log, OneNote. I have a notebook for myself that I keep for years. So ever since day one I joined Microsoft, I've also listed out after the first 90 days, I list out my observations, the good, the bad, and the messy stuff at OUP. I shared that with my manager at that time, and then after 90 days, it was 180 days, it was 360 days. Right now, it's more than 1,000 days now. I still go back to that list. So I look at myself and thinking, have I been an imposter? If I'm not an imposter, that means I am working on those stuff. Have I made any difference comparing to when I first joined, comparing to now? I think that, in a way, helps me to focus on my role as a doer, as a maker, as someone who's driving business forward, rather than just the title. I try to stay away from the title part of it. I try to stay away from judging myself based on that title. I focus on the task that I need to deliver.
Well, for me, it would be, if I need to give an example, it will be at the very beginning when I need to deal with those external business partners. Actually, some of them, or perhaps most of them, are quite difficult. So perhaps they want more discount, or maybe they just want to try to get as much as they can. So sometimes you really don't know how to counter propose the deals, and then maybe people will see you through, find that actually you're not very experienced or very good at that. So at the very beginning it was really scary for me, but how to overcome, which is you try to learn case by case. So maybe this time I took 5 steps, but 3 of them actually were quite failures. So I need to change my tactics for the next case. So I guess it's more like practice makes perfect. you try to perfect yourself, or maybe you try to improve yourself from time to time. And I guess I also try to apply this to my team, which is maybe sometimes your colleagues or maybe your team members make some mistakes, but actually it's not supposed to be something he or she wants to make that happen. So I guess able to give yourself or maybe other people a second chance and try to improve is very important. And the other thing is, I guess you have to admit that you are imperfect. So it sounds a bit contradictory, but it's very important. You always need to convince yourself that you are not perfect, but you are able to do better. So with this mindset, I think you can place yourself in a more comfortable position.
Okay, so the second question is, what advice would Mei Mei or Frankie give themselves if they think back to themselves in their early careers?
Well, I would say if I had some mentor to sharpen my soft skills, would be a great thing. No matter you work for a TV station, a press, or maybe some other industry, part of your work achievement is about your skills, but also part of your achievement is also based on how you handle people, how you work with other parties, how you deal with other parties. So when I was in the TV station, I think I was really terrible because I spent most of my time to doing translation. So I just focused on the manuscript. But actually, I didn't know actually your soft skills, how you communicate with people, or maybe how you set some pragmatic approach for your job is really important. But then when I start my work here in OUP, now it's not just about your own team, but about other team, but about other stakeholders. And through the years, I think we have more and more stakeholders, and we have more and more procedures, and we have more and more systems. So how to cope with them? Actually, you also need a very good mindset and also need very good soft skills. So I think the soft skill training, or maybe try to improve yourself about soft skills, is something I think is really important thing.
For me, it's probably one word: being open. In my earlier careers, I just didn't know any choices I have, so I tend to just say yes to everything along my path. That sort of led my career path the way it is. For better or for worse. But then I wasn't really very explicitly open about what I wanted to develop, what are the new projects I want to take on, when I wanted to move on to something else. So that in a way put my manager in a guessing position. It's not fair for him and her, and it's not fair for myself as well, because one thing my advice is being open and take ownership of your career development. You never know what will happen, but at least that is something you owe it to yourself to do. In my early years, the reason why I didn't share is because, one, I worry my manager would think I'm not being loyal to the team. or next time when there's a promotion, they will just give it to someone else because they know I want to do something else. Possibly, but maybe there are other areas. Once other managers know about my intention to move on, then there will be more doors open for me at the same time. So knowing what I know now, I would say if I can go back, I will be much more open in terms of my career choices, my personal life, how I want to balance things.
The third question is, we've spoken about where Frankie and Mei Mei are in their careers now, but where do they want to go next, or what do they want to see their future looking like?
If I can go first, I've only been here for 3 years. Comparing to my other career, this is relatively short. One thing I do go back to is that log that I kept during the first 90 years, my observation at OUP. I'm just flipping through them, looking at the things that haven't changed. There are good things, there are still good things. So I was more like a custodian, carrying good stuff, just continue on. There are bad things I couldn't really change, and there are messy and ugly things that I felt we've gone slightly worsened in certain areas, and certain areas probably slightly improved. So that list is actually what keeps me up, thinking about, man, Mei Mei, you have been here for 3 years. What have you changed? What are the difference you have made for the business and for the people and for the community in here? So that's what keeps me up at night, if you ask me, and that's will drive my action continue on as well. It's quite a pressurized position to be in. Even thinking about that list now, I feel pressured. Yeah.
So for me, I would say we want to do something new in terms of products. So it's not just about the type of product, but also about our audience. It's not just about the local audience. We want to extend the reach. So how we are going to make that happen? And the other thing is, I think it's also more about, regional thing. So as I said, now I am a representative of AE in some group function committee, and I really want to, gain more exposure, or maybe do more, strategic planning thing. And I think it's a new area for me to develop. And besides content creation, I guess maybe I'm also looking for, some development in terms of business development.
Okay. So the last question from the online stream is, if you're not sure of what your career looks like in the future, do you have any ideas on how people could identify what they want to do or gain experience in different areas?
Two parts that I have learned personally. The first one is by elimination. So the things you don't like to do, those are very easily, you can spot it right away, just cross them off the list. So that will give you a shorter list to identify your next career. The second part, it's, let's see, it talks about in different areas in terms of development. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So it's by elimination, taking things off the list. At the same time, it's by reading your past experience. What are the things that you feel most passionate to deliver? Think back 5 years, 10 years. What are the projects that gave you the highest satisfaction? In my cases, in my early careers, it's always about building some new program, introducing a new program to Hong Kong that was never there before. It was introducing the Microsoft Certified Professional Program, which is brand new. It was about the retail program, brand new. It was about Partners in Learning, a School of the Future program, brand new. And then going back to there, it's always the new program. So I realized that I actually enjoy, even though I don't admit, I enjoy dealing with ambiguity. Because with ambiguity, you're the one defining the rules. You're the one defining the outcome. You're the one setting a benchmark for others. So even at Education City Days, where it is semi-government, we can pretty much just have a relaxing career and work days. But then I decided to do some technology integrated with Question Bank, online Question Bank service, or the Learning and Teaching Expo. So it was from nothing to something. Think back at your career, some of the projects you have worked on, whether it is in the past 3 years, probably the past year. What was the one thing that stood out? Very often that's a reflection of your strength and what you should be building on and continue on.
Agree. Yes, elimination and also learn from your past experience. One more thing I want to add is you also need to take a closer look at the world you're living. because now you're talking about the future or maybe your next steps. So apart from what you like, what you enjoy, are you going to find a way to fit you in the world or maybe the changing world? It's not just about what you like, but pragmatically speaking, you also need to find some way to materialize it. I don't want to say monetize it, but materialize it. So, well, you need to be open. Well, learn from yourself, or maybe, just like Mimi suggests, well, if you have friends in different industries, well, you can talk to them and see if they can, give you some new insights, so that you can, do some multidimensional thinking.
So thank you so much, Mei and Frankie, for your sharing, and thank you so much for all your questions. But before the live stream comes to an end, I'd like to highlight some tools that you can use for your career development. So this is the first page of the new interactive tool that you can use to help you identify new learning opportunities. This document helps employees understand what tools and opportunities there are to develop at OUP. It focuses on 3 areas: experiential learning, performance and development, and leadership and manager development. Experiential learning contains information about mentoring program, which is a great resource to look at whether you'd like to get a mentor or become a mentor yourself. There are also a number of resources available on Oxford Share and Oxford People, including the Learning Lift and a variety of forums to help you have great conversations. You can also take a look at learning groups on Yammer, such as mentoring, coaching, learning at OUP, and many more, which is a great way to connect with colleagues globally. So this is the end of the online stream. We'll continue with a discussion activity with the participants in the room. So thanks for tuning in.